Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. We begin with disturbing details out of Winnipeg tonight, where police revealed more information about an investigation dating back to May of this year. On May 16th, the partial remains of 24-year-old Rebecca Contois were discovered near an apartment building in Winnipeg. Jeremy Skibicki was charged with murder in connection to Contois' death. Now Winnipeg police announced Skibicki has been charged with an additional 3 first-degree murder charges. Police say all 4 women are Indigenous. Tamara Pimentel has more.
Jeremy Skibicki faces 4 first-degree murder charges in connection with the deaths of 4 Indigenous women between March and May of 2022. 39-year-old Morgan Beatrice Harris and 26-year-old Mercedes Myron, both from Long Plain First Nation, are recognized as the most recent victims, along with another Indigenous woman who has been confirmed but not yet identified. She was believed to have been killed mid-March and was wearing this jacket. On May 18th, Skibicki was charged following the death of Rebecca Contois, whose body was found dismembered. Due to the circumstances of the investigation, the homicide unit did not rule out the possibility of more victims.
We're very sensitive to the whole missing and murdered Indigenous women investigation and inquiry and the recommendations that come out of that. This is top of mind for us.
Chief of Police Danny Smythe says other than Contois, no additional bodies were recovered, though there is enough evidence for first-degree murder. Angie Tuesday, family support and resource advocate for WPS, says she connected with the families of Harris and Myron. They ask for privacy as they grieve.
It's a tremendously difficult time for both these families that we're discussing today, as well as all of the families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people in Manitoba.
This now marks 50 homicides in Winnipeg this year. At a press conference, newly elected Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham says the increase of violence in the city is unacceptable.
We have much more work to do. More work to do to protect the lives of Indigenous women and girls, including Two-Spirited and LGBTQ people. We have more to do to address safety across this community.
The Grand Chief of the Southern Chiefs organization, Jerry Daniels, released a statement calling on hate crime charges against Skibicki. He wrote in part, the person charged with committing these heinous crimes has an online presence that must be investigated. SCO urges all those involved in investigating and prosecuting this person to charge him with committing hate crimes against Indigenous women. Police say they don't believe there are more victims and are looking for any information that will lead to the identification of the unknown woman. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
You can find more on this story on our website, aptnnews.ca. To Edmonton now, where Boyle Street Community Services has been helping provide services for homeless people for over half a century. With an aging and inaccessible building, they bought a new one. After receiving the permits from the city, they've now been told those permits have been cancelled. APTN's Chris Stewart has that story.
The Yogama Piasukamik King Thunderbird Center was scheduled to open in October of next year. Renovations were to begin in early December. Boyle Street Community Services say the $28 million project, paid for by donations, is badly needed. Their current location lacks proper accessibility and is run down. Jordan Reiniger is the executive director.
The current facility that we're in right now is not fit for purpose. It's inaccessible to the people that we serve. A lot of the folks that we serve have mobility issues, and it's not an accessible building. And it's quite literally crumbling on us, and so it's not a sustainable place for us to be.
Now, the city's subdivision and appeal board has revoked their permits. Documents show that 15 appellants filed complaints about the new building, located 2 blocks north of their current location. Concerns about improper zoning, incompatibility with the business district, and potential property damage were listed.
I think there are some people who have some concerns, and we would say even legitimate concerns around what's the impact going to be of a facility like Boyle Street, the King Thunderbird Centre, and the community. We've been really clear that we want to really work with the community on addressing those concerns, and we have sort of worked with them to address a lot of those.
Reiniger says that recent racist phone calls show that racism is playing a part in trying to keep the new building from going forward.
We've had some pretty disgusting, frankly, phone calls coming into our centre. Some of them so bad that we've actually referred them to the police, talking about the people that we serve in a very derogatory manner, very racist manner, and so that undertone is part of the conversation, and it's not, of course, everybody who's opposing it, but certainly that's a big part of the undertone of some of the conversations we've been having.
He says Boyle Street are looking at their options going forward and hoping this can be rectified and not cause too long of a delay.
It was a very troubling decision, as I said, partly because it listed a lot of the services that we provide here as recreation, which is frankly absurd and I think offensive in some cases, where they start talking about Indigenous ceremony and cultural practices in particular as recreation, which we think is offensive and inappropriate. And so because of how troubling that decision was, it actually, the benefit of it is that it opens up a lot of pathways for us in terms of recourse.
In an email, the City of Edmonton wrote that the Subdivision and Appeal Board is an independent, quasi-judicial board and referred us to their online decision revoking Boyle Street's permits. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
COP15, the United Nations Biodiversity Summit, is coming to Canada next week. Indigenous leaders held a virtual press conference on Wednesday to talk about their hopes for the conference and why Indigenous-led conservation works. Amelia Fournier has more.
Amid distressing reports of biodiversity loss across the globe, more and more studies show countries should look to Indigenous peoples for guidance and conservation. They are at the forefront of the biodiversity protection movement. Like Stephanie Tharassi of the Saisi Dene First Nation. She's working to make the Seal River watershed in northern Manitoba an Indigenous Protected and Conserved Area, or IPCA.
Every area in the watershed that the water touches is the way it's been since my great-great-great-great-grandparents used to walk and follow the caribou.
Almost 90% of protected areas created in Canada in the past 2 decades have been led by Indigenous nations. So in Canada, the federal government has started funding IPCAs. Valérie Courtois, an Innu and director of the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, hopes Indigenous land guardians' value will be recognized at COP15.
We are looking for partnerships with state governments that recognize our nationhood. We're not necessarily a recipient of a program. We are partners who have just as much of an interest in ensuring that the return on investment from those funds is maximized, and we care about the outcomes because the future of our own very future as peoples is at stake.
The panelists say they hope countries will sign off on the 30 by 30 agreement to have 30% of the globe be a protected area by 2030. Jillian Stavely is helping lead the work of her people, the Cascadena, to protect the Dene-Kusan area in northern BC. She hopes 30 by 30 will lead to more funding for Indigenous land guardians.
That target is a really important tool for motivating countries to partner with Indigenous nations, but it's also a very important lever for us as Indigenous communities to be able to advance our own vision for our people and for our land and for the future of our communities.
She said the COP15 is an opportunity for other countries to take a page out of Canada's book.
One of the biggest things that I really want to see happening in Montreal is that people see IPCAs and land guardians as something that can be highlighted and utilized on a global scale.
Tharassi says that regardless of COP15's outcome, Indigenous people will continue to protect their lands.
It's a time right now where we're hoping that this dialogue is changing and that the voices of our peoples are starting to be heard. And we've been saying for such a long time that protecting these lands is important for all of these reasons, and now the world is finally starting to catch up a little bit.
Amelia Fournier, APTN National News, Montreal.
2 Indigenous people are receiving the Order of Canada. That story and more still to come. Welcome back. Federal cabinet ministers met with Inuit leaders in Ottawa on Thursday as part of the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee. Priorities of the committee include land claims implementation, education, health and wellness, as well as housing. They meet 3 times a year. Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami President Natan Obed says the partnership has been a productive one so far.
We have had some incredible results and outcomes that have, in some cases, linked to federal budgets, such as housing allocations in budget 2022 and infrastructure allocations in 2021. But also we have started to create policies and directives such as the Inuit Nunangat policy.
First Nations firefighting program in the Yukon is getting a funding boost from the federal government. Canada's Indigenous Firefighter and Multi-Hazard Training Initiative is investing $3.5 million in the Yukon First Nations wildfire program. The organization trains and employs youth across the territory in wildlife firefighting, flood response, and other services. The new funding will help train 10 new instructors and 120 firefighters for its Yukon First Nations wildfire pilot project. The project aims to incorporate traditional knowledge, Indigenous knowledge, in wildland firefighting.
Indigenous communities are often underserved with training opportunities and opportunities to defend their lands. So it's really important that we see this kind of funding to help build up those communities and build their resilience.
And that's quite a program. We did a story not long ago on it. You can find it on our website, aptnnews.ca. 2 Indigenous social justice advocates were recognized for their work today at Rideau Hall in Ottawa. Gail Sear and Harvey McHugh were both made members of the Governor-General's Order of Canada. Sear has been involved with the Native Court Worker Association and is a former executive director of the Native Women's Association. McHugh is the co-director of the First Nations Youth Suicide Prevention Curriculum and is also the co-founder of Trent University's Indigenous Studies program. In all, 48 people received Order of Canada designations. Congrats to them all. A new Sports with Stranger is coming up on the other side of this break. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. So what have you been doing to enjoy the cold, snowy weather? I've been hiding inside, but Jesse shared this picture of his wife while out for a winter hike in Manitoba's Whiteshell Provincial Park. If you want to share your photo and be featured on APTN National News, you can email us at share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at Friday's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 2 in Halifax, 1 with snow in Charlottetown. -3 in Kuujjuaq, cloudy, and 4 below for Nain. +2 in Montreal, 1 and cloudy in Val-d'Or. +3 with snow in Sault Ste. Marie, 1 with flurries in North Bay. -11 with snow in Thunder Bay, flurries and 3 below in Sioux Lookout. -22 with snow in God's Lake and Norway House. -17 in Winnipeg, snow and 14 below in Dauphin. -24 Regina with snow, 22 below in Saskatoon. -20 and sunny in Meadow Lake, 24 below in La Ronge. In northern Alberta, -22 in Fort McMurray and Grand Prairie. 19 below and sunny in Edmonton, -18 in Lethbridge. +2 with snow in Vancouver, 5 above, and snow in Victoria. -18 with flurries in Prince George, sunny and 24 below in East Lake. -10 in Old Crow, 17 below with snow in Whitehorse. -35 for Yellowknife, 18 below with snow in Norman Wells. -25 and snow in Sax Harbor, 21 below for Paulatuck. -35 for Baker Lake, 33 below with snow in Cambridge Bay. -26 and snow for Resolute, 24 below in Igloo Lake. The North American Indigenous Games may not be until the summer, but preparations are already well underway for many athletes and coaches. This week on Sports with Stranger, Daryl checks in with the Manitoba men's basketball teams.
Snow may be on the ground in Winnipeg, but inside this gym, players and coaches of Manitoba's men's NAG basketball teams are hard at work. Joshua Gandier is one of the coaches for the team. A former player himself at the 2017 NAG games, he said practicing this early is needed as the teams are made up of kids from all over the province.
My experience in 2017, we didn't have too many practices. We had about 2 weekends of practice and then we went off to the games. So this is about our 5th practice now, and we've just been going weekly. I'd like to get some things going for our northern guys. We have about 4 or 5 for the 16U team who are up north. So I'd like to get up there in the new year to help them get some training going.
The teams are made up of 14, 16, and 19U. Some play on club teams year-round, while others only practice during these group practices. The players all relate to basketball in their own way, but that also brings them together.
I grew up playing hockey, and I just thought I wanted to change since everybody plays hockey in Manitoba pretty much. So I wanted to try something new, and I got hooked onto it.
What was it specifically? Was it just
well, watching highlights, dunking, wanting to do that someday. Basketball has been a big part of my life. It's always been there. Every time I feel down, I always resort to playing basketball with friends, stuff like that.
It's been a big role because it's took me places and I've met new people, and it's like it was like the only thing that was there for me in the reservation, and it got me out of there now because I live in Winnipeg now.
It's the competition, just the way it was learning. It's just it's like hockey's a big sport in my community, and so is basketball, and hockey's just no-go for me, so tried out for basketball, enjoyed it. Just because I'm tall, it's like playing it.
Because I could never skate, and for hockey, never had the best coordination. But just, again, with the Toronto Raptors, they're just never won before, only Team Canada.
Keith Mason is another coach of the team who, apart from teaching them the skills of the game, is reminding the youth to take in the whole experience leading up to NAG, even the practices.
I emphasize that over, I wouldn't say over winning, but I just want them to soak it all in and kind of appreciate the moment that you're in. It seems like a year. It's almost a year away, but that's going to go by fast. And then you're there 7, 8, 9 days sometimes, and even that goes by fast. Before you know it, it's over. You're on the bus home, and you're like, wow. And that was a really wicked experience, and it's been like that for me every time. Each time it's something new and awesome, and I learned so much. I learned so much from these kids every time. I probably learn more from them than they learn from me.
Gandier also hopes to see these players become coaches.
Getting these relationships built when they're young is so important, because myself getting into coaching now, it's just the first and a domino effect. I hope a lot of these boys want to become a NAG coach from this experience, and this just kind of domino effect grows into a bigger community. We have more coaches. Hopefully we can get a big program up running for the years when there is no NAG.
Now at the end of the practice, I got to show my skills by shooting free throws with a workout for the players on the line if I missed. Safe to say I'll leave the basketball to those who will be in Halifax next summer.
The brick. Good thing they did that at the end of the interviews. This week's episode of Nation to Nation is just around the corner. Here's a look ahead at what we can expect.
Hello, I'm Annette Francis, and here are the issues we'll tackle on tonight's episode of Nation to Nation. For decades, Indigenous women across Canada have been the victims of forced sterilization. According to a new report, Quebec is the latest province where this practice happened. And once again, we'll discuss man camps. A parliamentary committee will soon drop a report in Parliament that makes a clear connection between resource extraction and violence against Indigenous women. We've got all of that and more on Nation to Nation coming up after the news.
Thanks, Annette. Tomorrow night on APTN Investigates, a Supreme Court decision has granted Section 35 rights to members of the Sinixt from south of the border. But in Canada, the Sinixt were legally extinct for decades. Reporters Rob Smith and Melissa Ridgen head into the BC interior to find out what this means for both peoples.
Of this case, and I think it's fair to say the government understood that this case would change the way, we would look at cross-border peoples.
We knew we were those people, but we never recorded that we were those people.
Somebody had to throw out an anchor and get this started, and I elected myself.
I have spent decades educating the public about the Sinixt.
They were not able to establish that they were a proper representative body of Sinixt people. Why?
We got those first 6 remains back in 1990.
Because they didn't have criteria for who is Sinixt and who is not.
Since then, we have repatriated and reburied 64 ancestral remains on this site.
And they could not demonstrate that they had the consent of the Sinixt community.
Look at their sponsors, BC Hydro. Damming is one of the reasons we're declared extinct.
I know there has been, a lot of dialogue in this community around Marilyn James's baskets, which are not Sinixt baskets.
It's the same exact basket.
And you can watch the full episode tomorrow night right after the news, and also on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/APTN News. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Thursday. For much more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. Stick around. Annette and Nation to Nation are next. Have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.